Do you know love can change the moment you finally do this? Not in a dramatic movie way, not in some forced say the right words and wait way, but in the quiet way that makes your entire energy shift before anything in the outside world catches up. And that is exactly why so many people miss their breakthrough in love, because they keep trying to get the result while still carrying the inner state that keeps blocking it. You probably know this feeling already. You think you are doing everything right, but there is still that tiny part of you waiting for proof, waiting for a sign, waiting for the other person to confirm what you already want to feel. And that is where the delay begins, because love does not respond to neediness. It responds to the state you live in when nobody is watching. If you're still thinking like someone who is not fully chosen, then you are still standing in the old version of yourself, even if your affirmations sound perfect. What changed for you was not a technique. It was not a lucky day. It was the moment you stopped assuming that love had to be earned through effort, performance, or perfect behavior. That is the real shift. And once that shift happens, the entire dynamic changes. You stop chasing. You stop overanalyzing. You stop treating silence like a threat. You stop acting like one person's attention is the only thing that can prove your value. That is when love begins to reveal itself differently, because you are no longer broadcasting lack. And this is where the deeper understanding comes in. Neville Goddard's teaching, when used properly, is not about begging the universe for a relationship. It is about becoming the state that already contains the relationship. You do not think toward the wish. You think from it. You do not stand outside love and hope it notices you. You mentally step into the version of yourself for whom love is normal, steady, and already part of life. That small difference changes everything. The reason this works is simple, even if people complicate it. Your outer world tends to mirror the assumptions you keep returning to inside. So if you keep returning to the feeling of being unwanted, overlooked, or uncertain, then those feelings stay active in your experience. But when you start returning to the feeling of being secure, chosen, and naturally loved, the whole tone of your romantic reality starts to shift. Not because you force someone to do something, but because you change the state you were living from. That is why the message behind this video is so strong. Someone is in love with you because you finally did this. That this is not a trick. It is the inner decision to stop standing below love and start standing inside it. It is the moment you no longer ask, how do I make this happen? And begin asking, who do I have to become to let love reach me cleanly? That question alone changes your emotional posture. And once your posture changes, people feel it. They may not understand it, but they feel it. You become less easy to confuse. You become less willing to settle. You become less reactive to mixed signals. Suddenly, what used to shake you does not shake you the same way anymore. The same message that once would have sent you into a spiral now feels smaller, because your sense of self is no longer hanging on that one response. This is where things get interesting. Because when you stop trying to force love, the energy around you often starts moving in ways that surprise you. The person you thought was distant may start showing more interest. The connection that felt frozen may begin to soften. The silence may start breaking. But even if none of that happened immediately, the bigger win is already there. You are no longer emotionally dependent on someone else's behavior to know your worth. That is real transformation. That is the moment the old story starts losing power. And the old story is usually the one that says, love is hard, love is complicated, love is earned, love is for other people, love only comes when you do everything perfectly. Once that story breaks, you stop living like love is a reward and start living like love is a natural expression of your identity. That is when you become magnetic in a calmer, stronger way. And yes, that is also why some people suddenly get confessions, unexpected messages, or a complete change in someone's energy after they stop obsessing. It is not because they begged harder. It is because they finally stepped out of the state of chasing. They stopped trying to get love from a place of emptiness and started occupying the feeling of being already enough. That inner shift is what changes the field. So what is the this exactly? It is not one ritual. It is not one sentence. It is the moment you stop treating love like validation and started treating love like reflection. You stopped asking love to define you. You stopped putting your peace in someone else's hands. You stopped assuming that if one person does not choose you, then love itself is unavailable. That is a massive change. Because now you are no longer living from the old inner contract that says, if I am loved, then I matter. You are beginning to live from the new one, because I matter. Love can meet me in a healthy way. That sounds simple, but it is one of the deepest shifts you can make. It changes how you speak, how you react, how you wait, how you choose, and how you carry yourself in every connection. And the funny thing is, once you make that shift, love often starts feeling less dramatic and more real, less addictive and more steady, less confusing and more clear. You start noticing that peace feels better than uncertainty, pretending to be chemistry. You start understanding that real love does not require you to abandon your standards just to keep a connection alive. This is where people often have their light bulb moment. They realize that the real work was never about controlling the other person. It was about changing the state they were returning to, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. If you keep returning to the state of lack, lack keeps showing up in different forms. If you keep returning to the state of already being loved, the world begins to reorganize around that inner assumption. That is the quiet power of living from the end. You do not sit around waiting for proof before you feel the shift. You allow the feeling first. You practice the inner state first. You imagine yourself as the person who is already secure in love, already chosen, already at peace, already no longer available for half-hearted energy. And then, very often, the outside begins to move in response. This is not about pretending. It is about training your inner world to stop contradicting your desire. Because one part of you cannot say, I am loved, while another part of you keeps rehearsing loss, fear, or rejection. That inner conflict is what creates friction. But once the inner story becomes consistent, the outer experience has less resistance to overcome. And maybe this is the part you needed to hear most. You were not being blocked because you were unworthy. You were being blocked because part of you was still living as if love had to be proved before it could be received. That old energy makes everything heavier. It makes you overthink. It makes you wait for reassurance. It makes you accept less than you want because you are afraid to lose what feels familiar. But you are not that person anymore. Or at least you are no longer meant to be. The moment you finally do this, the whole pattern starts to crack. You become clearer, you become calmer. You become harder to manipulate with inconsistency. You begin to recognize that the feeling of being loved should not feel like a constant question mark. And that is why the outer signs start getting stronger. Not because you force them, but because you change the assumption underneath them. The energy is different now. Your expectation is different now. Your standard is different now. And when that happens, people either rise to meet you or reveal that they were never aligned to begin with. Either way, you win. Because clarity is always better than confusion dressed up as romance. So if you have been waiting for a sign that you are finally doing it right, this is it. Not because you are trying harder, but because you are finally understanding where the real power lives. It lives in the state you choose. It lives in the meaning you give to your experience. It lives in the version of you that you keep returning to when nobody else is speaking. And once you finally do this, love does not need to be chased. It starts finding you more naturally. The energy around you softens. The right people become easier to feel. The wrong patterns become harder to tolerate. And that is when it becomes obvious that the change was never supposed to begin outside of you. It began the moment you stopped needing love to tell you who you are. I hope this helped you. Subscribe, and I'll meet you with another golden nugget soon. Happy manifesting.